Welcome to the Mythic Life podcast. I'm your host, Eric Brumett, and today I am joined by a wonderful, wonderful person, Miss Meg. She has been helping Sarah and I with parenting and sleep training, sleep coaching for our little one, Soleil, and their relationship in conscious parenting. And as I read through your bio, this incredible development of the ebb and flow sleep method. So I'm so excited to get into this today and so happy to have you joining us today, Meg. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Eric. I'm really excited to be here as well.
Going through this system and learning from you around sleep training and working with children, I had my resistance initially going into it and going, oh, this is my fourth kid. I've done this a few times. Like, they all end up figuring it out anyway. Really, honestly, is so not true. And I have learned so much in working with your tools and your systems, and really gaining so much in understanding more about having a better development in a relationship with, even for ourselves, around going to sleep and having that process. I know so many people here in my audience have faced sleep challenges for themselves as well. And I'm curious, tell us your story. What brought you to this purpose, this passion?
Thank you. And to be honest, that is the nicest compliment to get from any skeptical parent. And the first thing I'd like to share is that I really believe that the skills and the tools that I teach children and teach parents allow them to get sleep without traditional sleep training, right? We don't use any cried out tactics. We want to teach you how to be 100% responsive, but in a way that ensures you're not getting trapped in the room. And that means looking at the experience from the child's perspective, because Soleil, coming from a place of co-sleeping and really seeking that secure attachment and anchoring energetically to a parent being right beside her, means that how do we shift to supporting her and having an internally referenced sense of security? And she communicates and she talks, and all babies communicate, just some through cries and some through words and some through pointing and ushering. And that even though maybe she's not quite as verbal as her big sister, she is so verbal. And that means that we need to approach her relationship with sleep and your relationship in terms of communication in a really sensitive and mindful way that is allowing you to respond to her and not react to her. Because anytime there's a reaction, anytime we're trying to avoid, suppress, or pacify her emotions, we're inadvertently strengthening both the emotion as an effective form of communication and the anxiety that underpins the emotion. So we don't use any cried out tactics, but through heavy co-regulation, you're learning how to guide her to self-regulate. And that is ultimately going to teach her how to self-soothe from like a secure, trusting place.
Yeah. And one thing that I really appreciated was this understanding that it's not like it's a not cry it out, but it's still having that space to let them have their emotion, have their feelings, that it really develops even at this early age of like a year old, even before that, an emotional awareness, to gain that emotional capacity. So tell me, when did you start really studying or practicing this? I see you've worked with close to 10,000 babies at this point, and you've been really exploring and developing this system. When did it first begin for you?
Yeah, to be honest, the concept of the mantra I developed and it's going to sound silly, but when I was 12 years old. So a quick little recap. I was homeschooled off and on through my entire childhood. And my mom has a master's in educate, well, two masters in education, K through 12. And so in her homeschool, where she worked with special needs children and neurotypical children, and then myself and four brothers and sisters, I essentially avoided going to school and avoided doing chores and avoided doing homework because I was so adept to playing with the children in her learning center.
Mm.
Even at like 5, 6 years old, I was changing diapers and mixing formula bottles. And of course, the co-teachers were there and it was all supervised, but it allowed me just to connect with this gifting that I feel like I was given to come and share with humanity ultimately. And then from the age of 7, I started helping with the Sunday school at my parents' church. I'm not super religious, but if I helped with the Sunday school, it means I didn't have to sit in church. And then
Mm.
by the age of 12, I took, my first aid CPR, my babysitting basics class, which is also a course that we offer now for young teenagers, and was
Oh,
able to barter dancing ballet twice a week by babysitting for my dance instructor and her couple of children 6 days a week. And
wow.
so, yeah, I had her two little ones and helping them get to sleep. I started figuring out what to say and what to sing and how to soothe and how to respond on the monitor and how to check on them. When you have multiple kids in different rooms, you have to like kind of navigate that and do it in a way that's methodical and consistent and predictable. That way, the child can trust the space that you're taking from them without going into a panic or getting really anxious that you're leaving them to go check on the other sibling.
Yeah.
And from then I had also done thousands of hours cradling the crack babies in the NICU in my hometown. And that's where I started to really notice even soothing techniques that supported those little teeny tiny failure to thrive babies. And I just kind of kept building and building upon this every family that I worked with. And after running 3 Montessori preschools and a Montessori Waldorf homeschool for over 10 years and an in-home sleep center, it just kept compounding. And I have no social life, but at least I can help you do anything in the parenting realm.
Yeah. And how many children do you have yourself?
Yeah, so I have 3 in my care, and I
In
say
your
in my
care.
care because I teach families that ownership is ultimately a delusion. Even the toys and the materials that we work with,
Yeah.
they're all in our care. We're having a turn with them. And I kind of point this out because if parents can help their own children to realize that everything that they're having a turn with is in their care, it minimizes the child building a sense of attachment to the toy or the object. It allows the child to be more comfortable sharing. It allows the child to honor turn taking more easily because they're not building their identity into that object. And so anyway, I have a 10-and-a-half-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 16-month-old, and I am a single mama by choice, so I've used donor sperm for all of my little ones. But then
Mm.
I also was a surrogate twice. So
Twice.
I donated one of my embryos to a 2-dad family. And then 6 months after that C-section, which was the third C-section at the time, I did a full round of IVF and a double embryo transfer, and then carried twins for another family successfully full term. And that was a fourth C-section. And then my 16-month-old was a fifth C-section. So I
Wow.
really empathize. Everyone has a different experience with being pregnant and with their birth journey. I'm just very grateful that my body copes really well with that. And my dream ages ago was, of course, to have a water birth, but it wasn't in the cards. And so I'm just
Yeah.
grateful, I can have babies in other ways.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. And to really help usher these souls in, and um, a lot of in my teaching, I practice the modality theta healing, and we explore intuition, and we have a program for recognizing and fostering intuitive development with children, and
Mm,
to work with parents around some of those tools to really, because the idea is that we're born open, we're born like, and we're hardwired for intuition. It runs through all of our nerves.
yeah.
And that when we face distress and when we face things that cause us to shut down, it shuts down cognition in our hardwiring, but it also shuts down intuition, and that they go hand in hand, right? So like when you work with parents, um, what do you find is most helpful for them to navigate those empathic senses and navigate in that intuitive field?
Yeah, this aligns so beautifully, and I can't wait to talk offline about weaving this into what we offer at Infinite Connection Academy.
Yeah.
But the way that I address this is by first teaching parents the tools to be responsive to their child and not reactive. Every time they're reacting, again, they're shutting them down, they're stifling their potential, they're limiting their capacity to show up in their highest light. And they don't even realize it. It's so unintentional. They think that they're navigating managing certain behaviors or trying to teach them self-discipline, or they're trying to work collaboratively. But, those no's, and trust, there's a time and place for a no, right? Especially for safety. But it's like there are so many other ways you can communicate to a child. Yes, you can do this when it's time, or connecting with them. Oh, I see you're really interested in doing X, Y, and Z. Let's make a plan. Let's go look at our calendar and make a plan when it's the right time to do that. And, if reminding them, if they're going to be trusting that we'll always work as a team, they can do anything that they want in life when they're ready and when it's time. And then it's just channeling those energies and addressing those
Yeah.
behaviors while you're meeting those needs in a really respectful and collaborative way.
Mm.
But once parents understand that foundation of responding and not reacting, then we can go into the next layer, addressing the behavior while meeting the needs. Then we can also look at the parents trusting their intuition, and also trusting guiding the child to trust their own intuition, because children do everything for a reason. And they're seeking safety. Sometimes they're seeking control as an illusion of safety.
Yeah.
They're seeking innovation. They're seeking um, expansion and creativity. And it's really our responsibility as caregivers and parents for these children to create an environment that the child can really just, thrive. And it's kind of like they're a little seed, and our environment is the soil, and we need to really offer them an environment that will set them up for success. And so a lot of times I'm looking at the room tours. If it's in relation to sleep, I'm looking at the home tour in relation to their environment to make sure that they have a balance of a little space in each room that the child can be successful and interact with, while the parent's trying to live life and manage so many other things in the background. And, these are just a couple of the layers, but
Yeah.
it really, you're on the right track, and it's so important. And this is also why I homeschool, right? No offense to everyone who sends their child to school, but I homeschool because the child only has so much time in the day to work on self-regulation. And that's the most important thing, is if you can self-regulate, if you can manage your emotions, if you can manage your little inner ego, which is your protector, and have that kind of stay in its place, then it means your light and your love and your potential can flourish past that without always being on guard and always being on the defense and
Yeah.
reacting and, tantrums in the whole 9 yards. So I think that as long as we can offer families that, and then, the rest, and we're not programming them unintentionally in society,
Yeah.
then I think we have a chance.
Have you found um, any specific thing of how this connects to neurodivergence and with their sensories and um, cognition, being a homeschool parent and having this system, um, what is your feeling about neurodivergence and that sense of personal development?
Yeah, I actually think while it stifles on one side of the equation, it actually is a superpower on the other side of the equation.
Yeah.
So I feel that it can stifle in the sense of if the people in the environment of that child are not understanding how to navigate co-regulation, self-regulation, leading that child to be interdependent as opposed to codependent. If those adults are codependent, and so then they don't even know what interdependence can look like with the child, a neurotypical child, let alone a neurodivergent child.
Yeah.
And, if we can help them get some healthy rhythms and routines that aren't like rhythms and routines. And I say predictability and consistency creates a sense of security, but that doesn't mean doing the same thing at the same time every day. Because if you do the same thing at the same time every day, then you actually end up being very inflexible in life.
Yeah.
And you end up kind of like losing your creativity and your innovation and, getting really complacent to this like survival, mentality. So it's a matter of like healthy rhythms and routines, predictable and consistent ways to communicate and interact. So if ever something, first off, there's no accidents. That's an important concept to teach, right? There's no potty accidents. There's no, oop, I accidentally spilled something. We make mistakes. And by neutralizing the concept of making mistakes and
Mhm.
also bringing in, it's okay, we made a mistake. We also get to make a correction, right? And being observant to these moments that happen, it's another version of being responsive to the situation versus reactive. But it helps the child trust that they're never going to be in trouble, which is very important for a child to internalize, because when a child thinks they're in trouble or they think they've been punished, even though that usually isn't the case, then it just starts to like have them question their developing self-worth. So we want them to know they're never in trouble. We make mistakes and we make corrections, and trust that we can come to the parent to ask for support, learn how to think in solutions as opposed to thinking in problems. And this makes communication very kind of black and white, for lack of a better term, but it makes it really simple to manage. You have 2 children, but if you imagine a classroom with 35 children,
Yeah.
and we're going through kind of guiding them all, and some of them are neurotypical and some of them are neurodivergent. It just creates a social structure, a modeling that is
Mm.
so straightforward and simple. And the way I see that the neurodivergence is a superpower for children when it comes to connecting with their intuition and fostering that is because they often don't have kind of their ego in the way, in the same way that a neurotypical child does when they're worried about like their self-image and they're worried about being in control and being right and looking good, and kind of some of those different dynamics. A lot of times they're just all heart and really just wanting to like go and be in everything. But it can feel really challenging to a parent or a caregiver, because if they don't understand the container that child needs to have, that environment that they need to have to really thrive, then
Yeah.
they're just pushing limits constantly. And it's really, the child's going to show up bad or misbehaving or disrespectful, but it's actually just an environment that isn't really suited for that child to succeed. And this is a lot of the coaching I do with families who have neurodivergent children. We might start with sleep, that might be chapter 1, and then we look at daytime regulation, then we look at feeding, and then we look at, all the sensory diet and all the pieces of the puzzle together. But it
Yeah.
really can be a superpower if we can give them the tools and set them up for success as well.
It's really understanding the hardwiring, isn't it? It's like how I remember you were sharing one of the tools that we use and implement is the colored lights, and that kids don't understand a clock, right? Like they don't understand that sense of time in that way. And you know, a course I actually recently just took with my teacher, Vienna Steibel, the founder of Theta Healing. She was talking about how there's this intuitive genius that can be so creative and clairaudient, but they struggle with math. They're always late for everything. They're never on time. And it's kind of like this hardwiring of this neurodivergence where it's like, sure, they're a certain type of dyslexic and they have this thing, but maybe they just are trying to force learning through a certain place in the mind where their mind is designed different. And the
Yeah.
colors that like actually can become anchoring to have rhythm that you're not going to get of going, oh, it's 8 o'clock, it's time for bed. And right.
Yeah, 100%. And my daughter's actually dyslexic as well, so that resonates a lot. And my son is neurodivergent, so that resonates a lot. A part of also why I've
Yeah.
homeschooled, because I can really tailor their learning experiences to their temperaments and personalities and their needs. Yeah, with the sleep light, we don't want them to have a concept of time. Time is an illusion anyway. We want
Yeah.
the child to always stay present, and we want them to stay in that present moment, connected with themselves, with their environment, with those around them.
Mhm.
And, a misconception with the concept of a sleep light. First off, it's a color indicator. It is not a night light, right? We do like to have a nice dark space. And in some cases, parents want to phase it out and turn it off through the night, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Every element of my method is flexible and able to tailor to the parent's comfort. And if we can't come up with a rationalization that allows them to adopt the part of the methodology, then we focus on something else. But it's nice because it does, with the sound, with the color, with the experience, with the energies that the parents are modeling to the child through that playtime or through that sleep zone time, or if they need to have an emotional break or they need to have a full play break to really recalibrate their nervous system if they're getting overwhelmed. Like, this is how you can ensure that we're sending a predictable, consistent message to the child, but we're not leaving them trapped in high cries. We're not
Yeah.
leaving them in any emotional distress. And we're really being cognizant from the child's shoes, from their experience, what are the most gentle and respectful steps to take each little step of the way, so that we're being as incremental as possible. And that's ultimately what makes the adjustment more gentle.
Yeah. Um, a personal note just for the audience here listening, like when you introduced that to me, I was so reactive. I had the hardest time with that one. I was like, oh my gosh, this is programming, this is coding, like I'm not happy with this. And I had this huge blow up response. And you know thank goodness Sarah is very patient, and she's also a Capricorn. She sticks to what she commits to. And so we did implement it, and I had to really do a lot of work on myself. After I worked on my triggers around it, I actually found out from my oldest daughter. She went and she was visiting Puerto Rico, and they went to this island off of Puerto Rico that like is like this environmental island, and at night they changed the lights in the town to red. And the reason, and she said the reason why is because um, it doesn't cause light pollution distress to the natural environment.
I love that. Oh
And
yeah.
because
And for
it's like a
the
bird sanctuary and stuff like.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
was like, oh wow, because that was my big trigger around, oh, all this light on, I want to really appreciate darkness, and like all of these like stick to things. So it's beautiful that that's actually the color for sleep time is the red light. And, um, helped me really work through that one, and understand and accept it better of how it is. And Soleil responds to it so well, that and the mantra. We're still working through and implementing things. Another piece that you really helped me with was realizing that I'm not helping my daughter sleep by sedating her, by laying down and getting her all the way to sleep. I'm not actually being that educational parent, like teaching her how to sleep. And that was a really big breakthrough for me. So I just really want to acknowledge that and appreciate you in that. It's hard parenting. We're ran by so many instincts. We're very reactive from our subconscious, and we're always projecting so much onto, you know, when we have these kids in our lives. And they are we're not having kids. We're not having babies. They're people, and they do grow and end up having their life. And this place of working with conscious parenting, it really is so important for having a lasting relationship beyond when we're all cohabitating. um, you work with families all the way up till they're 12. Do you find that there's a certain kind of tipping point? Like why does it end at 12?
Yeah, it actually doesn't necessarily end at 12. I would say, from the sleep side of things, from birth to 12 years old is usually the range that it's much easier to coach, especially in a remote capacity once they're older than 12, I mean, I absolutely have helped children who are 13 or 14 who've struggled with sleep and anxiety, hiding tech under their pillows, and, really fighting to be regulated in relation to school and the day, and, feeling empowered. So that shifts more into like a, you know, pre-adolescent, teenage coaching, life coaching type dynamic,
Mm.
right? The 0 to 12 is, I would say, my kiddo side of things. And then the 13 through adults is my like life coaching, holistic health coaching side of things.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I suppose it's just kind of the target market right now, so I don't show
Yeah.
up spread too thin. But I've worked with children of all ages, and I've had families that I worked with them since they were born, and now they're, in their, gosh, my one family, I had started with them when another family I had started when I was 12, and now they're like in their 20s and married and having babies. It's pretty fascinating to see like a longitudinal study of the methodology being implemented and how that has impacted, with the parents' consistency in the background, their entire trajectory of living. And I'm looking to do more studies like that also on my sleep side of the process, so that I can validate that it's more gentle than Ferber and Cry It Out, and that I've actually discovered a way to teach self-soothing as a learned skill, and not the like put them in the crib and let them self-soothe, but they're really screaming and crying bloody murder, but like they can go from being overwhelmed and upset, take the edge off those alarm bells that are sweeping away their sense of safety, get them to a calm, happy, comfortable place, and they can play, coo, hum, just self-soothe, be
Yeah.
comfortable in their space, and then choose to sleep from a calm and happy place. So I'm really excited about that. But I just wanted to come back to your feedback. It gave me goosebumps when you said about how I really supported you in that capacity. And it's been such an honor and a privilege to work with your family. And Soleil has already come so far. And I know that, she'll continue to grow and develop and soon be comfortable and trusting of being in a space independent of you guys. I always say independent, not alone, because our words matter, the energy we're projecting matters, but it's also, a child is never alone. Like, we're all very lucky and privileged, and we have each other, and you might be independent in this other room, but you're not alone.
Yeah.
And, so definitely a word that can leave everyone's vocabulary, because we're also kind of connected energetically in oneness anyway. But yes, when a parent lays with their child all the way till they go to sleep, and for some parents, it might work for them. And if it does, great, do what's working. But if it means that the child anchors to your physical proximity, or anchors to needing you to put them to sleep, because if we say point A is wide awake and point D is fully asleep, and A to B and B to C and C to D, like in terms of the pathway in her brain, she's relying on you to bring her closer to sleep, then it
Yeah.
means that muscle will be very weak for herself. So ultimately, what I do is work with families and identify what is the child's pathway from awake to asleep. What are they anchoring to? And how can we empower them to take ownership of that while still having cuddles with their parent in another time of the day or in another way? We don't want to take anything away from the child that they love, but just kind of shift everything around. And the child, she can still have sleepovers. Like, once she's settled in her space,
Mhm.
put that calendar up. Here's your sleepover with dad. Here's your sleepover with mom. Here's your sleepover with her big sister. Totally fine. And she can still have 4 nights a week to sleep independently.
Yeah.
So we can get to there. And, if you travel, you can still co-sleep. Like, there's so much flexibility in implementing the method while still supporting her and gaining these life skills and creating a more sustainable backdrop for her.
Yeah. And that's such a beautiful aspect to it, is that it it has a diversity of tools to use, where so many things out there become such a rigid structure or extreme, and this adaptation actually creates more flexibility. What How do you think that relates to conscious parenting versus like all these extremes of like either attachment parenting or rye method, like, because there's so many cool aspects within them, yet sometimes it gets a little too extreme and to one direction.
Yeah, and I feel that everyone who made the rye method, made these different methods, they're all well intentioned, but their experience ends somewhere, either with their life because they've so focused on that one direction and then they pass away and everyone's living on their work, which is wonderful. Or they just don't have the awareness that they can either have their cake and eat it too, or what I feel I've done with our methodology at Infinite Connection Academy and with Ebb and Flow Sleep and with, just all the different programs that we offer parents. And I like what you said, adaptations, right? These are all adaptations. I want to adopt that. But ultimately, we take the best of all worlds. So the aspects from RIE, the aspects from attachment parenting, the aspects from, free range parenting, but everything has to be in balance. I don't complete, I lean more to like free range parenting than most. And I would say everything I do within that is attachment based, trust based. And I say inner child led because it's not just child led from a behavioral standpoint, but their inner child and caregivers, adults, inner childs. But at the same time, I am always attuning to everything that they say and do every moment throughout the day. And the reason I do that, it's not a helicopter parenting where it's like, don't fall, don't do this, don't do this. But
Yeah.
it's really just listening, even if I'm on my work calls, I'm still attuning to the frequency, the energy of their communication. And if it is not respectful and compassionate and neutral, it could be happy, but neutral. I don't want drama. I don't need superheroes and bad guys. That's like non-negotiable, not even a thing, right? And Soleil is little, so you might see her do her little role play with her little wooden characters, but at some point there's going to be a narrative behind that, and you want to be always listening to that narrative because that narrative, it communicates like the narrative that's going on in their mind. And a lot of times they're role playing from stories they've heard, shows they've seen, social environments they've witnessed. But a lot of times those narratives can be inadvertently kind of internalizing, anchoring them to reactions, to ways of interacting with situations that are not effective and they're not what you want them to be doing long term. So it's not really a matter of like, oh no, there can't be conflict, because I do teach them how to navigate conflict. But it's more so if we look again at that, the child has only so much bandwidth to work on self-regulation through the day. Why would we put anything that's going to make self-regulation harder in their periphery throughout the day? Because that's already like shooting yourself in the foot. Like, why send them to watch, which you would never do, but like the 4-year-old that sees Star Wars and they embody it and they come home and they're shooting them up all over the house, or whereas maybe a teenager could see it and enjoy it, but not really embody it. So some of it's age appropriate, but then also it's just being aware and teaching them to be aware that if the way they're communicating or interacting, because oftentimes they're not aware of it. But if you just allow it to keep happening, and then 6 months, a year, 2 years later, you're going to be wondering, why is my child being this way? Why are they choosing to respond or react or communicate in this way? When ultimately we're accountable and responsible to that, communication program.
Yeah. What is your take on kids and media? Like, what's your feeling there?
I think that media in doses and being really cognizant of what they're watching can be supportive. I think that if a child has an environment that they don't need any technology up to a certain age, I think that's wonderful, right? If you have land and nature and puddles to splash in and falling down trees to climb and standing up trees to climb, and if you can just go and be at the beach and in nature and being really a part of a active home where life is slowed down to the degree that a child can regulate in the capacity of contributing to getting the dishes done, getting the laundry done. My kids get up and make their beds every morning and they do their morning meditation and their yoga poses and their, deep breaths and their gratitude, and they go through a whole morning ritual that takes them about a half an hour, and they do that self-sufficiently and independently, and then they go make their breakfast, and then they have their outside time and their independent play time, and then they get a little tech time, the two bigger ones, and then they do their workbooks and And we also do like baking and all kinds of things. But I think that, you know, below a certain age, if you can avoid it at all cost, any technology, I mean, maybe aside from like the child that's screaming bloody murder in the car seat and you have 2 hour drive, like it would be healthier to show them some home videos or some pictures or a nursery rhyme that is not like a fast-paced situation. That would be healthier than the emotional trauma of screaming for 2 hours, right? So I think you have to
Yeah.
look at the context of the situation. But if, you know, it's just a matter of using that as a babysitter, I don't think that that's appropriate. I think that, you know, by about 8 years old, I was using tech with my kiddos. They're learning to type, but we also have a standard typewriter, the old school one that you
Oh,
can see
cool.
the numbers. I
Yeah.
love, whenever I work with homeschool kids, and I really recommend one for your bigger daughter. They're about $200, but having the old school typewriter, it really
Yeah.
helped them with reading, with typing, with the letter sounds, and they love to see the mechanical side of what they created. Um, but now my bigger kiddos are working on coding and they're working on, you know, we use AI image generator and they make custom pictures based on what they communicate to the image generator. And then they print those and they write their own storybooks. So I
Oh,
think that
fun.
have a place that's really constructive and productive. And
Yeah.
it can be, you know, and then there's like a cooking show that's with kids that they're out in nature and it's really like a cool thing. It's this kid who's a son of a chef and a world-renowned chef or whatever. And like watching that together, and then we try and cook the things that we saw. So now
Yeah.
that's a family bonding experience, right? And then the only other type of show, you know, might have a little bit of what I call ego in it, but then we pause every scene and we make corrections and we talk about how we would communicate instead. Or with storybooks, right? We pause the story, we reframe the story. Sometimes we get a permanent marker and we cross it out and we rewrite what we would have it say. So that experience is really positive for them and helps them to be aware and be neutral about it. No one's good, bad, right, or wrong. Everyone's working on different things at different times based on the tools they have. And it creates
Yeah.
tolerance, it creates compassion, it creates a willingness to like be courageous and step up and take a stand for like how it could go. And at the playground, it's like, sorry, we don't play that way. Can we, you know, and I have them empower the kids to play another way,
Yeah.
right? Or we don't speak that way is what I have them say to the kids, but could we try this instead? And so it really helps them be an advocate for a better way while not removing their ability to integrate with society, which is ultimately a different level of awareness.
Yeah. I I know we run into with Freya because she's going into a Waldorf school. We actually have a media agreement in our class around how much and what and she definitely faced initially like, but I'm bored.
Mm,
And it's kind of that same thing of like a sedative instead of like learning to co-regulate, um and what happens out of that boredom and when they learn to co-regulate is such an empowered place of creativity and play, and taking it to that place that you just shared of like rewriting the stories and pausing and having it be more of a process and interaction sounds so cool. I love that idea. I think I'm definitely gonna have to adopt that one.
We can talk more about this anytime. I know we've mostly
Yeah.
focused on Soleil, but I have lots of supportive things to share with Freya if that's of interest.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. You brought up like crying for 2 hours in the car and kind of reference towards that being like a trauma response. One thing in your system is an 8-minute rule. What is there kind of a tipping point in emotion where it does start to have like an inflammatory response in their nervous system, or what exactly is the 8-minute rule for?
Yeah, and actually with littler ones, it's a 6-minute rule, right? And so it doesn't mean that they're left crying for 6 minutes or 8 minutes before you do something because you're doing something every step of the way.
Yeah.
You're co-regulating with them, you're offering them, you're modeling one frequency of interaction, you're modeling that you're pointing them towards sleep, you're pausing to remind them to take breaths, you're giving them those pep talks, you're interacting with them constantly. But part of the reason that we need to lean into those escalations is to take the edge off of those escalations. Because if the child escalates and then you're like, okay, let's do this, let's do that, it's all right, oh my goodness, I'm here, mommy's here. Which, by the way, if you say I'm here or mommy's here or daddy's here, inadvertently you're sending the message they're only safe because you're here. And that means if you're not there, they're not going to be safe. So that's
Mm.
the worst thing that parents could say. And unfortunately, parents say that quite often in relation to sleep, especially if they're trying to create space from that. So I would keep that in mind. But in the 6 minutes for teeny tiny babies or the 8 minutes for toddlers and preschoolers and school age little ones, you have to think about, they are wired to escalate and get something else, either a reaction, a rescue, the cookie, whatever it may have been, right? And so to some degree, in order to help them get comfortable with being uncomfortable, you have to lean into those escalations. We need to take the edge off the alarm bells. We need to let them see the pattern, that they can trust this new pattern, and that they can, and soon that's going to become their new comfort zone, right? As they learn to manage their emotions, because right now all they know is up and that's it. The co-regulation is learning to come back down together, because you're modeling those shifts and those flows of energy. And then soon they get comfortable in the environment, they learn to trust the pattern. We take those full breaks to recalibrate their nervous system. And then the alarm bells have subsided and they're like, oh, I'm still here and I'm safe and nothing else is happening. And then they can actually just look around and listen, and they can be quiet and they can be calm. And, of course, if you're too quiet, depending on the stage of the process, you're still soothing, you're still singing, you're still connecting with every element in their environment.
Mhm.
Because if you were to be quiet when they're quiet in the early stages, then they would be like, dead space, what's happening? And they would panic again. And they would get, swept up in their emotional gap. So ultimately what we're doing is we're closing the emotional gap. We're through that heavy co-regulation, we're guiding them to learn to self-regulate. And so those 6 minutes or those 8 minutes isn't about, let's have a certain amount of time be okay to cry. It's about knowing what has been, so I'm excited to validate this with the studies that I'm going to do. I'm going to do a sleep study, fingers crossed, with Stan Kachowski from HIT Lab from Columbia Business School. That's been
Oh,
in the
yay.
talks. So I'm really excited for that.
Yeah.
And we can validate these timeframes, but I've come at it from the other direction, which is, what is the least amount of time that we can cry, that we can go through this pattern of soothing and emotional break, and then get to a green reset and have that be like the minimal amount of time to then help them snap out of it when we have that full reset, and not have it inadvertently reinforce all of that escalation, right?
Yeah.
So it's really been about testing out the shortest amount of time, because it's not like what's the most longest effective amount of crying. Maybe a longer time might seem effective, but that's not how I want to go about it. I want to avoid cries at all costs by making sure the environment is set up for success. I want to then minimize cries by making sure that we're taking a gentle, respectful, appropriate step. And then the cries that we have to deal with in the moment, I want to make sure that it's the least possible. But if you just take a break and go to a play break too quickly, it can actually just make them afraid to be in that red space, that sleep zone. So we have to be able to be in that sleep zone long enough for them to see that they're safe in that space, and for that fear and that anxiety and that confusion and that frustration at not getting an expected response can shift to I'm clear on expectations, I'm trusting the dynamic, I see that I'm safe because we're all here together, and I'm the only one just stuck in alarm bells. And as they subside, then everybody
Yeah.
feels much more calm. So
And
yeah, did that help?
in that way, it's like being conscious is being present, right? And when we are going through and experiencing emotion, it doesn't mean that we're not present, but sometimes the emotion can take us out of being present at a certain point. That's the thing with certain degrees of anxiety, where maybe it's just mental conversation of anxiety and you're obsessing over thoughts, and then all of a sudden you're in distress for hours trying to fix the problems, not just in your life but on the whole world. Like, people go on these crazy, rhythms in their minds, and then end up not being able to sleep, not being able to fall asleep, right? So it's
Or
even with
choose to sleep.
parents, you know or wake up and then you can't go back to sleep. And like, finding these ways of co-regulating so that we can feel our emotions and be able to come back to a place of calm, safety, and free will, instead of going into distress and dissociations to where we're going in some huge either mental or emotional spiral away from the moment that we lose our capability of bringing ourselves back to consciousness.
Yeah, I actually call that spinning. And
Yeah.
I'm going to be putting a program together for adults very soon, because I've actually worked with a lot of parents with their own sleep once their little ones have settled into a good place. And the first one to carry over that I teach the little ones that adults can learn is, again, this concept, this belief of I'm trying to fall asleep, as opposed to realizing you actually can choose to sleep. You can choose it. It doesn't have to be, I'm falling asleep, I want to fall asleep, I can't fall asleep. But, so the narrative behind that, in order to choose to sleep, you have to close your eyes, you have to lay still and focus on your breath. So in order to close your eyes, you need to be trusting. In order to lay still, you need to be relaxed. You need to choose to relax your body, every finger and toe and muscle and everything. And in order to focus on your breath, you need to be present, right? And so
Yeah.
this becomes a mantra for those bigger kids. It's very supportive for the bigger kids. It's really empowering to first take the ownership of, like, you're not falling asleep. You're going to choose it when you're ready. I know it's tricky. I know it feels overwhelming sometimes, and then of course we get to work through what is going on the broken record, right? What is the repetitive conversations happening? Because a lot of times parents and older kids, they just need a life coach. They need, a structure to process the experiences they're having. They need a framework, a conversational framework to understand what, they're and how to guiding them how to effectively interpret situations, and that modeling. And once we can kind of clear that away and also teach them to compartmentalize and teach them to trust and teach them to really kind of step it up, then it becomes a lot easier. And there's essential oils that are really supportive. There's plants that are really conducive to sleep. You do get to look at the environment. You get to look at some feng shui. You shouldn't be having a mirror right at your bed, or, in the bedroom. If you have one, cover it up.
Yeah.
I'm not superstitious about it, but when it comes to children and seeing reflections and shadows in the night, it can create anxiety to see yourself on a mirror. And if you're crying and you're looking at yourself crying on a mirror, that's very overwhelming.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
more of a practical thing, but
Um, in Theta, something that we've been working with and I'm bringing into sessions, because I work with a lot of people in reprogramming their subconscious and digging into these patterns of where these limiting beliefs originate from. Um, we go back to a lot of very intense, tragic, and traumatic memories. And sometimes even revisiting them can be re-traumatizing. So we use different processes with somatic and with the body. But one thing that um, I've been bringing in is when you do go into that spinning, or when you are going and visiting a trauma, you want to visit it while being present instead of fully going back to it. And if you are fully back in it, then you're in it again. If you can visit it without going all the way back to it, it creates a space for you to be able to actually release the trauma carried in the cells. And what we use is um, if they're going into panic, it's focus on the exhale, not the inhale. And when with the inhale, it's actually smelling. So by smelling, you can smell the room and let yourself all of a sudden become present in the room. and all of a sudden you're not in the trauma anymore.
Mhm.
So that's something that has been really cool and effective lately. If working with people that is carrying this distress and trauma, it can help reset so many things to the nervous system. It can reset even a stimulation of oxytocin in the body, and has been really effective. So, if that's something that you want to try
I love
out with working with breath,
that.
sometimes breath doesn't do it. Sometimes it takes this sensory, um, to really re-anchor it.
I love that. And I do a lot of like meditation and yoga and mindfulness with kiddos and a lot of breath work as well. And not specifically for trauma, because I find that the little ones that I'm working with, we're avoiding and we're giving them the opportunity to grow up without those limiting beliefs so that they're not going to need the therapy and have the traumas later in life, right? So we're reparenting the parents while more effectively parenting the little kiddos. And so, yeah, I feel that that's so aligned though. Like I would love to refer clients and families to you if I find that they are struggling in a capacity that maybe you would have a better suited um, structure or tools for them. And also, I love, yeah, I love how you're going about it, really just being helping them to rewire and reframe those experiences so that they can transmute those experiences, and ultimately it clears away that energy in the body, and the memory might still be there, but I think the attachment to the impact can subside. And I also, and I do a little bit of this in my life coaching, but I'm less, and the body is a big part of it because the body does carry that weight in the cells, as you're saying.
Yeah.
But I love working from kind of an analytical side with the mind and how I can support teens and adults to not be so attached to that story, that narrative as like their identity,
Yeah.
and to be able to shift away from that so that they can just be a blank canvas and a clean slate with themselves. And then, moment to moment, it's a lot of reprogramming and rewiring their interpretations, but then taking responsibility and ownership for that, and get between, the life coaching and the gaining healthy coping skills and setting their environment up for success and being surrounded by a loving, compassionate community. And um, yeah, it's a whole holistic experience. And I love that.
It is a beautiful vision and absolutely wonderful work. And I just really appreciate you coming on here and sharing it with us. I feel very blessed and honored to be able to receive your coaching and be in your program. So thank you, Ms.
Thank you. Yeah, the goal is really going to be to get a community space and, be able to live in harmony and in oneness with the land and with, permaculture practices and organic gardening and the homeschool, and create a retreat center for the parents so that, everyone can come and, experience that way of living and then take those tools back home and integrate that into their home. And so that's the ultimate vision. And then just really, being able to create this knowledge base and wisdom base that also can help everyone, you know, hold all the wisdoms of all of our elders and of all the different cultures, because there's wisdom in all of them, with all of them, and have all of that in a knowledge base that can be shared globally, because then we can heal ourselves, transform the future generations, heal intergenerational trauma, and in some silly way save the world. It's been my dream since I was little. So
Absolutely. And we are Mythic Life, free thinkers, deep feelers, courageous trailblazers. We own our myth with our vibes, how we think, feel, and act. We believe that love is a given, not something earned, that spiritual is sexy, kindness is cool, and earth is sacred, that everybody has superpowers and life is too boring without magic. We walk our talk, and when life gets real, we heal. we choose our path and make it epic. And Miss Meg, you have made an epic journey, and I so appreciate you coming on. For everybody listening, if you're new to this podcast, subscribe below. And for more on Miss Meg and her incredible work, you can check her out at infiniteconnection.co. The link will be in the description below, and really check it out. She's incredible to work with, an absolute joy, and so helpful to family dynamics and really embracing this strength and vitality. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And twice a month we have our free healing circle, so come join, have an experience with Theta. We love to support you all, and we'll see you all next time.